Welcome, everybody. You're watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Belle, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified EFT Supervisor and Therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. And I am so excited to welcome today, and this is actually kind of a special treat because we have kind of a famous couple in the EFT world here today on our show. We have Chad and Angela Imhoff. And you guys may recognize them from Success and Vulnerability. That's how we met. So blessed to know these two wonderful, wonderful folks. Chad is a certified EFT supervisor, and they both live in Arkansas in work with the EFT community and the Arkansas Center for EFT. And so, Chad is a marriage and family therapist, Dr. Chad, right? Dr. Chad Imhoff. And you go by the EFT Guy online.
Sometimes, yep. I've got a little bit of YouTube out there presence with that. But
yeah. EFT Supervisor. Angela is a licensed pastoral counselor. She's a licensed minister. She does pastoral counseling, addiction counseling, and she's a certified life coach. And together they have a podcast called the Connecting Couples Podcast. It's absolutely amazing, a beautiful resource for you guys to give to your couples. And they also said they just released 14 special episodes on addiction. And I'm so excited to listen to it myself because it's such a beautiful, beautiful resource. So welcome, Chad and Angela. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting us, Annabelle. This is awesome. We're glad we get to be here and engage with the process with you and kind of talk about this. We think it's something that's important. It's close to our hearts too. So thank you for talking about it.
Awesome. And today, so guys, what we are going to talk about actually is relapse. And this is something that comes up a lot if you're a therapist and you're working with your clients that are going through addiction recovery and you've experienced them going through relapse. You know, it can be difficult as a therapist to understand what's normal, what to expect. To me, relapse is one part of addictions that isn't talked about very much. So, how about you guys? Could you maybe start us off with a general, maybe understanding of addiction and the recovery process?
Sure. I mean, people throw the word addiction around, and I think it's not really well defined. I mean, I think DSMs and other things have tried to. So they've tried to say, hey, this is what this is. And it's not easy to understand. So when you think about addiction, generally we're saying somebody who is doing something they don't want to do and they can't seem to quit. And it's kind of taken over their life. They don't have a way to slow down or to stop. And so when I think about addiction, that's kind of how I think about addiction. It's like I can't seem to stop it. Sometimes that could have like chemical components to it, like hooks, so to speak. But I really just think anything I want to stop doing that I can't seem to stop doing or do more than I want to. Those are my thoughts around addiction anyway. Yeah. What do you think about the recovery process? You work so much with recovery. I want you to kind of think about what is recovery?
Yeah.
How do you define it quickly?
So recovery, there's lots of avenues out there now, which I'm really grateful for. I mean, there's lots of anonymous groups that you can get involved with. And I think the biggest part of starting a recovery journey is that the person going at least has an awareness to say, I have a problem. A lot of times a partner can say, my partner has an addiction, but they're not ready to admit it yet. And that person probably isn't going to go to recovery. So the recovery process is self-identified. I want to go and I want to start doing a thing. And usually that means building community around yourself, whether it's through an anonymous group or a church group or some other group that comes together and says, I also struggle with this thing. And then there are people like sponsors who come along. And so it's just a place, I think, where you can really get a lot of psych ed about whatever it is that you're struggling with, find some validation and normalizing, right? There's some EFT process in the recovery process. And then they start kind of what we call like a road to recovery or a pathway down, trying to find, I want to say healing, or even the word sobriety gets thrown around. And sobriety would be with something, let's say like people will say drugs, alcohol, even one that's really kind of been on the rise, pornography, where I don't want to do this habit anymore. But there's a lot of people that come into recovery that say struggle with a healthy relationship with food. And so that's a little different because your sobriety isn't, I don't want to eat anymore, right? It's like, I have to find a healthy relationship with this thing. So I think both, they go hand in hand. I mean, we love in recovery when somebody's also in therapy, getting kind of a different level, a deeper level of growth. But if somebody is in therapy and then comes to recovery, we build the community around it to try to help them get the support they need. So I hope that gives kind of a balance of both.
I love, so you talked about like how the word sobriety gets thrown around. Could you guys maybe describe for everyone what the difference between sobriety and recovery is?
Sure. I mean, I think sobriety is really a self-defined term, and it depends on what you're doing. So when I think about sobriety, you might think of, complete abstinence on one end of the spectrum, or you might think about harm reduction. I'm thinking about Suboxone or something like that. So there's lots of different things that you might call sobriety that different programs might label differently. And so when I think about sobriety, I think, do you have a clear metric that you can measure that says, oh, I am not doing this thing, the thing I want to stop, more than I want to, or it's not causing the harm in my life under, the threat or harm reduction plan. It's not causing the harm that it used to. So I have some level of functioning at least around my area of addiction or struggle. And when it comes to recovery, like being in recovery doesn't necessarily mean sobriety. In fact, nobody comes to recovery sober for the most part. Most people come to recovery and say, I've got to figure out what that even means. And depending on what program you go to, sobriety then has its own definition within that recovery community or recovery process.
Yeah.
I would imagine that it's super important for, if somebody is struggling with addiction and they're trying to enter the recovery process if they're in a relationship, for their partner to come in and be involved in the process. Because I can very easily see, and I have seen in my experience as a therapist, is how the partners may even define sobriety or recovery differently than, how the programs might be defining it. And that can cause struggles for couples. Have you guys seen that?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the areas where I have been so grateful for EFT and just the exposure I have to systemic work, because really for a very long time, in my understanding, recovery has been pretty cognitive behavioral, right? Come in and the one person gets pathologized, you are the addict, you are the problem. But what I've learned is this systemic process where if you get a partner that understands the struggle they have, that comes alongside them and starts to create safety and a place where they can actually respond well, it really shifts the game. And you can see that individual get healthier faster, and you also see that couple do better repairs and have a healthier relationship. But it's a hard pitch, because that's not been, in my experience, that's not been what has been pitched for a very long time. So I always encourage, when I get a call like, my partner is addicted to this, can you help them? I always try to say, you can help too. Why don't you guys come together and start this process? Because you can learn tools that will help you be a better partner in this person's process. I don't want to throw out extra words, but words like codependency, words like relapse, words that these couples come in with a really, in their minds, idea of what they want it to go. I want my partner to never do this again. And maybe the partner goes, I just need to have a healthier, use of this. So even helping a couple identify what the real goal is, and do they have the same expectations around the goal? I mean, these are all things that will help them in their recovery process and in their healing process grow, I think, at a better pace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I jump in there real quick?
Yeah.
I just think, if you're thinking about how it works in relationship or in a couple, and I work with lots of couples also that come in and struggle with addiction. I'd say like 50% of my caseload is that. So I see a lot of this. And if we can just clarify what it is they're looking for, whether it's, harm reduction or all the way over to complete abstinence and sobriety, I think you get kind of everybody on the same page, and you get, I don't want to see the partner as the cop, right? Or the person who's enforcing, but I bring a partner in most of the time as a resource for comfort and as someone who can help kind of organize this process. I'm really trying to validate both sides and both experiences of that, so that they can support each other in the process. Now, couples come in completely different. They're all over the spectrum when it comes to that. So But that's really what I'm aiming for, is like, can we find ways to resource this relationship as a place of comfort and safety in order to reduce the need for the addictive substance or behavior. So those are my quick thoughts on it.
That sounds already right off the bat like such a better framework and defined goal for working with addiction than I've sort of seen talked about. Just being able to, I love that idea of the partner not being the traffic cop, not having to be the one that holds them accountable, that they're actually brought in to help be a resource for comfort, to help reduce the need for them to turn to whatever it is that they turn to.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's profoundly different. And even under that framework, when I'm thinking about our topic today of relapse, I sort of feel like that even already opens up some level of understanding or expectation, that because I think a lot of couples that come in, and I know you guys have seen this too, the partner of the person struggling with addiction will sort of demand complete abstinence, and that may not always be realistic. And so then when complete abstinence doesn't happen and they use again, then it feels like such a betrayal, and the relationship feels re-traumatized, and the partner's thinking, how long do I put up with this? You just can't be abstinent. And it's hard when you're not the addicted partner, when you've not, it's hard to understand addiction, from the other side. And it can be easy to assume that it should just be easy to quit, to kick that. And it's not always so easy. So how would you guys, is relapse just plain and simple using that substance again, or is it defined differently?
What do you think?
Oh, well, I'll say, I think it depends. I mean, that's a terrible answer, but it's also like the answer probably. Relapse depends on how you've defined sobriety. So it's good that we started with that question. It's like, well, what did they define, and did we help them clarify what sobriety is, or what their goal is? Even if it's not sobriety, it's some form of like how we use or have a relationship with the substance or behavior. But I would say, when I start thinking about what is relapse and who needs to be in charge of the relapse or the conversation around it, I don't want to put the partner in the role of in charge of, or like, I want to think of like AA. I don't want the partner to be the sponsor, right? Like, I don't want him to be the person who I'm going to confess every struggle and every relapse to, or every even hint towards relapse, right? I've seen that go terribly bad, especially for relationships. But I do want a partner to be able to kind of know what the structure is, and I want to find that partner as a place of support, not as again, the traffic cop. I don't want him to be the person who's engaged with it. Having said that, when I bring in a new couple, so you asked, that's a huge, giant question, by the way, in my mind anyway. Sorry. When I bring in a new couple, I have to kind of set up, well, where are we? Sometimes abstinence is life-threatening. For somebody that struggles with alcohol specifically, they can have all kinds of adverse side effects that come along with it, up to death. And so you have to make sure you're in the care of a medical professional at times. And so after we're past that stage, you get a month into sobriety. I have abstained from, let's use alcohol, for a month. Then we need to have an understanding or a conversation, and I'm using Angela and myself here, as to what sobriety is. Are we allowed to have a glass of wine at dinner, or am I allowing myself to have a glass of wine at dinner if I'm the alcoholic? And if so, how does she already know that? Yeah. Right. Otherwise, we're not just talking about a relapse for me around sobriety. We're talking about a betrayal inside the relationship around alcohol.
I want to jump in too, because you specifically brought it up in terms of the partner, which I think is so valuable, because a partner will say, fix my partner, get them well and get them to stop doing this behavior. So when we get to work in the systemic level, I would say very similar to cognitively pitching a cycle to a couple. We say to them, even though cognitively now you possibly pursue or you withdraw, it doesn't mean you're not going to get in that cycle again, right? So to be able to say to a couple, hey, here's what you're presenting with. You've got years and years of, let's say, pornography use or alcohol or drug use or gambling. I mean, those are just some of the things that we get, presented to us all the time. that partner, there is a term that is used called codependency, where that partner isn't addicted, it isn't looking at pornography or isn't using drugs and alcohol, but their partner's use of it is kind of running their life too. So there's so much mistrust in that relationship that they've never been able to bring forward because they're so afraid they're going to trigger their partner's sobriety back to a relapse, that now they almost feel trapped in their relationship, to be honest. Well, that doesn't make for a healthy, secure relationship. So as we start to rebuild their bond and want them to have security, that partner of the addict has to have the permission and ability to bring that mistrust forward. So I really do, Chad, to work with that other partner to say, hey, if you, like, I'll have a wife or a partner say, I suspect my partner's behavior is off and I suspect something's happening, but I don't want to accuse them. What do I do? And I'm like, those are conversations we have to teach them how to have because they've never been able to have those conversations. And we have to be able to do repairs around that. So to be able to say, hey, my partner relapsed. Well, I knew the relapse was coming, but I didn't say anything. So is it my fault? Is it, I mean, it's not, I wish it was easy, but it's not, it's layered. And we have to give them just small steps along the way of repairing those breaches, those betrayals, building secure attachment, and helping them recognize you're making small steps. You've already come this far. So this mistake, if you want to call it a relapse, or I call them speed bumps all the time. Like, is this a little speed bump where they told you quickly, you guys did a repair, you're already back in therapy, you're already going back to meetings? That's different than the 7-month bender that your partner had been on. So do we call it that? Can we recognize we're not where we were, we're further along, and now from here, we don't have to go back to the beginning. Let's just see what went wrong and move forward from there. So it's a process. It's a process.
I really love how clear and specific you get there. And so let me see if I'm understanding you guys correctly. What I think I hear you guys saying, and again, this is so awesome, is basically kind of how you define sobriety would also be dependent upon how you guys define the goals and sort of their level of addiction and, what sobriety or recovery looks like, getting them together on something connected around what does this mean for us? Well, one partner may be saying total abstinence, which may not be feasible or realistic, but saying let's get together. And I love with the really big nugget there is to have the partner be a resource for comfort that for their addicted partner to help reduce the need for them to turn towards their addiction. And what I love about that is it already makes space and sort of, to me, sets up the expectation that we understand complete abstinence may not be happening or feasible or expected right off the bat, which can also, in my mind, sort of eliminate some betrayals that might happen when we try to just hold this to a strict abstinence policy, and then when they can't live up to it, it just, and then what I hear you saying, Angela, on top of that also is being clear about when this does happen, right? Even if there is sort of a violation, it can feel like a betrayal, but being clear and specific. Was this, I had a drink or whatever, I watched the porn again one time and I told you about it. And it was just that time and we're talking about it and we're in therapy versus, like you said, that 7-month bender that they were on before, like really distinguishing this is different. We don't need to go all the way back to the beginning, right? We're still along the way. I feel like that just holds so much more space and flexibility for the process right off the bat.
Yeah, I think what you're saying as you're talking, I'm kind of over here thinking about like how important it is that everybody has permission to talk about what is and kind of the goal versus like expectations of the other, right? So it's like, as the therapist, I want to set up this platform for a couple to come in and have a discussion around how they both want this thing to be different, and they'll have different expectations, like we all do in all of our relationships. But can we get on the same page and start to have conversations around desires and longings and what's happening underneath some of that use of a substance? It reminds me of that the Irish saying, right? Everybody asks me about the drink, but nobody asks me about the thirst.
Right.
I'm like, I really want to get to those thirst conversations so that when if I'm the addicted partner, when I want to go do the thing, I'm able to have a conversation about my desire, my thirst, instead of just, hey, I want to drink. It's like, oh, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious, and I don't know what to do with my heart right now. That's the level that I really want to find that comfort and support at, not just, oh, don't drink, right? That's not what we're looking for. So yeah, I mean, as you were saying it, I was just kind of like, that was going through my head going, man, that's what we're shooting for. That's our target. That's our goal. Yeah.
I really love that. Ironically, I'm actually taking notes as we're talking because
That's good. Yeah.
so often I don't get to take notes on these. I really love that. And actually what kind of stands out for me, so as a therapist, I feel like so much of our training is directed towards helping the addicted partner and not a whole lot around helping the partner of the addict. And I can see therapists get really split here. A lot of their own triggers and values and biases can get triggered around the partner using, or would they also believe sobriety or recovery should look like. And I can just even see the pattern here, even as you guys were saying. It's funny because you were talking about the addict. People ask me about the drinking, but not the thirst. What are their longings? What's going on for them? And the fears around using the substance. I'm thinking of that on part of the partner who, because most of the time when I have couples come in with addiction struggles, the partner of the addicted partner gets really, really rigid right off the bat and just demands total abstinence. And so to be able to expand that conversation, because again, total abstinence may not be feasible or really realistic. And I want to feather that out a little bit more with you guys, because I also know people, the partners struggle with, well, at what point is it enabling, or I don't want to, enable this to continue. And I think that's part of the fears, is that somehow making space for this to, progress towards total abstinence feels like somehow I'm enabling or allowing or giving permission to. And so that's why I think there's that fear-driven rigidity when they come in that says, nope, just got to put the stake in the ground. They got to completely quit and never do it again. And so being able to have that conversation about what is the partner's fears about if they do continue to use, what does that mean for their relationship? And
I think I'll jump in with you there. I think that's one of the reasons why maybe people would not like to say relapse is part of the process, because it sounds like we're giving it permission, or like, you should just expect it and therefore don't try to ward against it or something. And that's not necessarily the pitch. But the reality is that if somebody has gone to comfort in distress, something specific, for so long, to just, even if they have a recognition that it's unhealthy for them and unhealthy for their relationship and unhealthy for their family, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to just walk away from it. And so that's just trying to say, hey, we want to give you a glimpse of what it really looks like. But something you mentioned, I think, is super valuable to just kind of make overt. And that's, we have seen couples come in where they do have a stretch of sobriety, but yet their relationship still isn't healthy or secure. They still can't talk about hard stuff. They're just sober. And so I think that's the part, even what Chad is saying, like, it's not only that we want to, by the way, make sure that they're safe, right? So if somebody relapses, a conversation I'm having with a partner is, let's discuss a safety plan. And so when there's been a stretch of sobriety, I'll have a conversation with both partners about that. Like, we're going to give permission for your partner to lock the bank account when you're starting to relapse because you've made choices that have really financially hurt the family. Those kinds of things, so that they kind of go, okay, I still love my partner, but I need to now know I'm in like security phase where I have to keep my family safe, and then we're going to come back to this and have a conversation. So I agree with you that we don't just want to say, just have this wholehearted permissive stance where they get away with whatever and there's no consequences. That's not true. put safety in place and come back and go, what happened? Where did we miss it? Where is the structure of recovery that we've built around you not really secure yet? How do we have that conversation so that we can start to help that partner bring up being a safe landing? I've had partners go, we've had sobriety for a while, but I don't know how to rely on my partner. I don't know how to ask for my need to be met because there's been so much mistrust of not getting my need met that now I can't. So now we have it on the other side where we have to rebuild a healthy cycle for them to be able to rely on each other. And that just takes time and is riddled with speed bumps along the way.
Yeah.
Add to that.
I just realized something while you were saying this, and I hope this isn't like too far ahead, but I just had this like aha moment, and I hope I'm going to use the right language here. But what I loved about what you just said is, and it's kind of like around the safety planning, and it also reminds me of sort of the neurological order of operations that we work with in EFT while we're doing the emotional work, working on the thirst, not just the drinking, right? And so maybe, part of the protocols are to help me not turn to the drinking when I'm thirsty, and how to have some safety planning, and how, there might be time again where they've had so much more practice and relationship turning to this other thing than they have been doing the emotional work, turning to their partner. So they may not be able to go cold turkey, but sort of about this process thing, like the problem solving level, even though we're not totally done through the emotional part, it's like when that couple can be connected, they can problem solve. And I hear even on that problem solving level is ways to keep the relationship safe early on through the process. Like, hey, I can feel myself starting to lose control to my addiction right here. So instead of actually losing control to my addiction, I'm going to tell you, my partner, and let myself pass off control to you so you can keep us safe while I don't know how to keep myself safe. So it's still like a layer of that relational work where I'm actually turning to my partner and asking for their help to keep us safe from my addiction. Now we're both fighting the addiction together. Am I getting that right?
I would celebrate it if a couple could do that. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about, there's so many nuances to this. I mean, as I'm thinking about it, I thought about 3 or 4 different scenarios where I'm like, that maybe could or couldn't work. And I actually went to another area where I'm like, and sometimes the best thing that a partner can do is say, no, this was the last straw, and set a hard boundary and say, I'm not, until we talk about it, just like you said, if they could talk, until we can talk about it before it happens, I'm not going to come back into the relationship because it's too threatening. Yeah. The other thought I had is on the side of the partner who's experiencing someone who is relapsing. If I'm the partner who experiences my partner Angela relapse, then I'm over here going, what is my role in that? Do I have a responsibility to this? Do I have a boundary that I need to put in place? Do I have a structure that needs to be clarified? I'm like, that's not an easy thing to do, and it has a actually really I think closely tied relationship to emotionally focused therapy or EFT, because if Angela's turning to something, a substance, a website, whatever it might be, on a consistent basis to get her needs met, and I'm maybe a pursuing partner, it tells me a lot that I don't matter, that I'm not the thing they need, that I'm not what they want. And so as the partner of someone who struggles with addiction, that's why addiction is so nasty, even if it isn't life-threatening for someone. It says, hey, she's going to a thing that isn't me, and maybe I'm not needed in this relationship as long as she has her video games. She does not like video games, but I'm like, whatever she's going to for her comfort or for her release. And it really sends nasty messages about who I am. And so that's why addiction's a problem in relationship, especially for the partner who's not using the substance or the process.
That deeper view of self is really hard, right? If it's, let's say, alcohol, then I might say, doesn't he love me enough to get sober? Or if it's pornography, then I go, that's adds a whole bunch of layers sexually. Am I not pretty enough? Am I not sexual enough? Am I not able to meet his needs? And there's so many layers to how the partner feels, that it is a natural tendency. I think about George validating the good reason why I might try to control, overmanage, become an accountability, become a sponsor, try to do all the things. And it just gets really hard. So if you can get a couple, back to your point, to say, hey, I'm really struggling and I'm feeling tempted to A, B, and C. And then we go, okay. Or typically they already have, like, oh, I just found out my husband went to the liquor store this afternoon. Here is now my plan. Okay, find another place to stay, make sure my kids are safe, make sure our money is safe. Like, you put that plan in place, then they're coming back to me the next week saying, we had a hard weekend, this is what happened. And I go, you guys just problem solved, came back to it, put your plan in place. We celebrate that. We find the weak spots. We shore those up. We move forward again until, guess what? It might happen again. Then we see where it went wrong there and we clean that up and keep going.
Yeah. So this brings up a lot of good points, is how do we talk about relapse early in the process, and how do we distinguish between being realistic and reasonable versus enabling the addiction to continue?
Yeah, I think the couple themselves having some definition is super important. So first of all, and I've had couples that come in and say, hey, if this happens 3 more times, I'm leaving, or 1 more time, I'm leaving. I'm like, well, I would caution people to stay away from like setting a perfect 1 more time ultimatum kind of scenario. That doesn't normally work. So I find myself over here going, well, but you do have to have some metric for yourself that says, you know, that I know where my line is, or I know where my problem lies. And it kind of takes me back to go, well, wait a second, how much can I take if I'm and I'm really thinking about the person who's not addicted. Then if, again, back to our scenario, if Angela's the addicted partner, how long can my heart take seeing my partner go to something else for comfort, or go somewhere else to get their needs met? And it's, yeah, sure, Angela, if she's addicted to alcohol, she might die from it, or opiates, or some other substance. It could kill her. But relationally, at some point, I have to say, I can't keep taking this. And I think clarifying that is probably the therapist's job. I know there are messages embedded in all the things that we do, but really relationally, what does it mean to me when I see my partner leave and go to the thing versus come to me with their pain? Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can put a perfect answer on, you know, when is enabling, or what is enabling versus what is, you know, just a relapse, right? But I think it's a good question to ask, and really to work with your partners. And if you're a therapist working with a couple who struggles with this, I would encourage you, clarify the messages that are beneath it. Clarify when you went to drink. If you have no idea why you went to drink, we need to understand more beneath that. Yeah. We need to understand and articulate. And that's where my enactments start. Like, when I feel this, whatever that thing is, level of distress, then I tend to go do the thing. Mm-hmm. So there's my enactments early on in EFT. But as we get further down the road, you know, we could start to talk about like what kind of failure and how you deal with failure, how you deal with shame, what's the good function of shame in your addiction, and what's the good function of even alcohol or if we're using alcohol, and what does it do for you to allow you to continue to work, to do the next thing, or to get up the next day. All of these things have served a function, and I always want to be saying, if I were you, I would. It makes sense that you're doing it. We've got to find ways to validate both sides of that, whether it's the addictive side or the, I want to say, dependent or codependent or interdependent, however you want to think about it. And they may be different levels there too, but you've got to be able to think about that and validate both sides of the struggle.
The little thing that I would add to that is I sometimes will have a conversation, and I do often work with the wives of somebody who is addicted to mostly pornography, gambling, drugs, and alcohol. I will try to take the word off of enabling, because that implies I'm going to do something that does or doesn't affect your behavior. And I will really try to make it self-focused. What do you need, and what are you responsible for yourself? Mm-hmm. And try not to hinge their behavior on what you do next. So I really try to kind of bring back, hey, you're only in charge of yourself right now. And if they have kids, obviously I really leverage that too. Be responsible for your kids. But let's not try to say we're going to do the thing that changes them. Let's focus on what do you need? What's healthy for you? When do you know you've had enough? When do you need to get safe? And if we can do that and just sound sad, but let that other person be responsible for what they're doing. And like Chad is saying, work with them, then it takes away a little bit of that behavior is by, fault of somehow me doing a thing more or less of, and I want to stretch that out and say, okay, focus on being a healthier this version, and then it tends to work out better in their recovery process. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So kind of, and I know it's a fine line, but if I'm really sort of understanding this, in some ways, relapse is common to the process. It does happen. And there's a difference between recognizing it as a normal part of the process versus enabling it. And it sounds like part of differentiating is having that deeper emotional conversation about the partner turning towards their addiction for their needs to be met and with their pain, rather than turning towards their partner and the impact on the partner, how they feel, and getting clear about where their line is when they've sort of reached that point of no return, that I can't keep staying in, and taking my partner turning towards this other thing. Like, I need to get safe. And it's a totally different conversation than just the behavioral level.
Yep.
You got it.
Yep.
Oh man, you guys, this is great. You really have me wanting more. So profound. And I think just a much more amazing framework for understanding addiction and the process. And again, it makes space for a reasonable amount of hiccups during the process, but still always being specific and clear and targeted about, what is our goal? What is our focus? How do we get there? Where are we with this? Where's our line? And do we keep going? How do we keep going? How do we focus on reducing the need to turn towards our addiction and turning towards our partner? And when it sounds like when we can get clear on that also emotionally for both partners, it's easier to, again, like normal to our EFT work, when we can reduce that threat to disconnection, it's easier for the couple with the therapist even to come together and problem solve ways to keep themselves and the relationship safe during the process. That sound fair? Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. And I would say it isn't even on the couple's behalf, but the self of the therapist piece. My first or second year in recovery, when I was working with couples and one relapsed, internally, I was like, I failed them. I must not have done this right. I need to do better. I need to read more books. I need to get more training. And now at year 18, I'm like, you maybe not this casual, but enough that it's like, sorry, you relapsed this weekend. I'm going to see you on Wednesday. Come on in and we'll talk about what happened. And I think the process of addiction has had so much shame added to it already that if we can just normalize and validate it a little bit and take some of that shame off and go, golly, I hate that this happened for you guys again, but let's figure it out. And I'm still in this with you and I'm not afraid of it, but it's your experience. You're still here. So let's keep going. I take a deep breath as I say that.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is something that's kind of on the leading edge of my work is really understanding the function that addiction played with and including shame as serving a function. People give shame, and I don't like to experience shame. I don't want people to live in shame, but shame serves a function in their life. And if we ignore that, I think sometimes people go back to their negative behaviors, whatever that might be. And I'm thinking of addiction specifically, but they go back to something because they don't know how to motivate themselves without the shame. So there's lots of layers to this that we could talk about that I don't think addiction's fully understood by any means, but we're certainly trying to like say, hey, these are some layers that make sense. And shame is one of those things that I'm like, man, I know it's not fully understood, but it definitely plays a big part in addiction. And anybody who writes about it would say that's a large part of what we're talking about when we're talking about somebody who struggles. Yeah.
Right. And what stands out to me too also is shame. I mean, like addiction doesn't just have the capital on shame and the impact. It's like shame really plays a pivotal role in stuckness.
Yeah.
Even if they're not addicted to something, there is a function that shame has. I've seen this one with a lot of couples. And I've seen this in just humans in general, is that somehow we've sort of learned that we use shame as a motivator to do things differently. And maybe sometimes it can produce some positive effects, but more often than not, I think what we see in therapy is that the shame, while well-intended, the function may make sense and, again, understandably there to motivate different behavior, actually backfires and ends up driving us back into the very behavior we're trying to avoid.
Yep. No, and that's why I would say we've got to find ways to validate and understand shame better. If we don't do it, and again, I'm kind of focusing on addiction work, but I'm like, but if we don't do that as part of our work with addiction, you just miss something that's probably going to lead them back to the very thing you're trying to, mitigate. So
right. Oh, I even think with both in addiction in general, like shame work in general, like how often I even see like family members or partners, parents towards their children trying to use shame as a motivator. And then they bring that on in themselves and become adults who continue to try to use shame to motivate themselves.
Yep.
It's such a powerful force. And I almost felt like you wanted to say several times, it's almost like sometimes therapists pay shame kind of lip service, but they don't really go enough into it.
Yeah, we have to go expand it and understand it and validate it. I mean, and I don't mean validate it so, like, keep doing it, but like understand it and understand the function it serves in their life. Yeah. They have tried or someone taught them to use this in a way. And so we have to understand it and help them see it so that they can bring it forward and have it responded to and have it serve a different place or sit in a different role. Especially when it comes to addiction.
When addiction becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, my shame message my whole life has been, I am bad, I am a failure, I'm never going to measure up, I'm never going to get it right. How much more does addiction make sense then in my life? Because it just shows you exactly what we already all know about me. To be able to get into that with them and start to give them a different message and to find acceptance from their partner in those places, it is a big shift. And the family piece, I love that you bring it up because so much of the work I do then ends up discussing family of origin influence and now how they're trying to become this healthier person in their relationship and yet still trying to address messages from their past. I mean, it is a layered and convoluted process, but one that both gives both of us energy. And I think that's why we'd like to roll our sleeves up and dive in there with people. This is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the faint of heart.
It's hard work. It's hard work. And man, you guys, I'm ready to sign up for your training. Like, this is amazing. So speaking of training, so where can people find you? Maybe is it a different place if they're a therapist wanting to be trained by you guys on how to be a better, a more effective therapist working with addiction versus like a couple off the street looking for help with their addiction?
Yeah.
How do they find you guys?
I'm going to give a couple rundowns.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can find more about us at our website, which is therealimhoffs.com. And it tells some of our story and our past and even some of the ways we both got into the work that we do. And so you can find a lot of our stuff there, specifically on addiction. Like Annabelle said at the beginning, we have a podcast for couples and we have a 14-part series on addiction. And so that's something to check out. And then Chad and I just recently started doing intensives for couples where addiction has been present or is there. And so you can contact us through our website that way. If you're a therapist, there's a few places. We did something called an SV Live, and this is, really where Annabelle first was with us in that SV Live on success and vulnerability, and really started saying, yeah, let's talk about it more. So there was a SV Live on addiction that Chad led. And then we also have a few full clinical example sessions where George does a consult with one of my couples, and they have addiction present in their relationship. And he does really deep work, does like a encounter with the addict's younger self. And so there are quite a few things, and we can give you all the links, and you can post them if you want to. So there's lots of ways you can get to us.
Or ICEFT, Arkansas EFT, all those places. If you emailed and asked for Chad Imhoff or Angela Imhoff, you would find Chad Imhoff on ICEFT, and then Angela Imhoff, Arkansas EFT. You could email that at gmail.com, and it would get to us as well. And again, successandvulnerability.com, or Chad the EFT guy, or
lots of places.
I mean, yeah, we got. If you Google Chad Imhoff, you'll find me.
And you guys, I know the way you guys pronounce your last name, it can almost sound like you're saying Imhoff, but it's IMHOFF. There's no A
correct
between the M and the Imhoff.
M like Eminem, Imhoff.
I'm Hoff.
But that's not how you pronounce it.
No, but that's how you spell it.
It's right. Yeah. It's not I'm a Hoff. It's I'm Hoff.
I'm Hoff. Yep.
Yeah. There you go.
Makes me want to watch Baywatch again.
There you go. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being on. I will make sure that I put the link to your guys' websites and your emails in the description for this video. If you guys are listening in podcast form, you might just have to rewind and write it down, but you can also, again, just Google Chad Imhoff, Arkansas EFT, you'll find them. And, if you are an EFT therapist, make sure that you guys check out successandvulnerability.com. It is an amazing online platform to sort of learn at your own pace through EFT modules that have both a teaching aspect. We have some, I remember we did the fails and nails and demonstrations, and even some live demonstrations of working with real clients and couples. And it's just a tremendous resource to help you learn along your EFT journey, especially in between big trainings, because we can't always attend trainings round the clock. And just such an amazing, amazing resource. It was such a blessing to be a part of the founding member of Success and Vulnerability. And I love you guys. And I hope that you guys, if you haven't checked out successandvulnerability.com, make sure you check that out. And once again, thank you both for coming. And also make sure that you guys check out their podcast, the Connecting Couples podcast. It's amazing. And you can recommend it to your clients. If you're a therapist, tons of beneficial information. And make sure that you drop them a line and let them know how much you enjoyed this episode. And I just want to say thank you to our subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure that you do so now, because more videos are on the way. Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients, for helping professionals. Available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.